And if it's your first time, you're most welcome. Tanvir, great to see you. Really looking forward to you sharing more with colleagues later on about the APNA network and conference. Linda, thank you for being here. Always good to see you. Sabina, lovely to meet you. Not too far away from me in East London. I'm in West London. Great to see you, Neil, here as well. Okay, Leah, shall we click on while you are letting colleagues into the room? I will move through the slides. So next slide, please. Thank you. So if you haven't met me before, while you're introducing yourselves, let me introduce myself. My name is Monique Carriel. I am the co-founder of Bravery in the Boardroom. A little bit of my backstory. So I am an executive coach and strategic advisor. What does that mean in English? I help organizations and people to build brave, inclusive leadership capability and confidence. But my backstory is I worked in the NHS for 20 years. I started off in an admin role and worked my way into the boardroom. And the last 5 years of my time, I was a director of strategy and transformation at a community trust in London. Leah, can we go back to the full slideshow for me, please? Thank you. Back one. Thank you. And so what I say here always is, I got into the boardroom. I was the youngest director at the time. I was the only Black director at the time. I have 3 children. My youngest hadn't started school yet. I'm not the average person you'd see in an NHS boardroom. And that's what I wanted to change, because I knew that talent is everywhere, but opportunity isn't. And it's really why Bravery in the Boardroom, I'll tell you a little bit more about why we exist, but it's why I was determined to start this movement. Leah, shall we click to the next slide? So a little bit of housekeeping for today. You should be able to see me and you should be able to see the slides on your screen. The session is being recorded. If you can't hear me, enable your audio. Select speaker view. So if you go to your Zoom toolbar, you can select a view. I'd encourage you to select the speaker view for your best viewing experience. So then you'll see me and you'll also see the panelists when they join me. Interact with us via the chat box. I've already asked colleagues, if you're joining now, please do let me know where you're joining from. So your name and where you're joining from. Great to see people from up and down the country. I encourage you to share your reflections, your thinking, and of course, your questions. We have time for audience Q&A, and that's really important to me, that you have time to ask the panelists. It's not often you get access to board level colleagues of South Asian heritage. So I really want you to focus on that. This is about recognizing their excellence, but also celebrating it and giving you access. So ask those questions for me, share them in the chat. Follow and tag us on social media. So if you don't follow Bravery in the Boardroom already on LinkedIn or on YouTube, please do so. There's a wealth of resources there, and you will also stay on top of when we have new events. Leah, shall we click on? So I wanted to just share a bit of an agenda with you today, because it's not only about us speaking with the panelists, it also is about that case for change. Why are we speaking about this? Why do we need to keep keeping that conversation about representation higher than ever? I mentioned that we'll speak to the panel. There'll be some audience Q&A, and Tanvir will be joining us before we finish up. And also we'll signpost you to those BITB resources that you can access as well. Leah, shall we click on? So why does Bravery in the Boardroom exist? I mentioned a little bit about this in my opening introduction, but it really is about, I want to transform the face of senior leadership, that we build brave, inclusive boardrooms, and more importantly, those succession pipelines, which is why if you are an aspiring senior leader, no matter where you are on your journey today, that actually you can come into spaces like these and learn. This space is for everybody, regardless of what level that you're working at. We challenge that status quo. So these are the conversations that I hope spark action, that do impact on policy, practice, and what we see, but also gives you that insight in so that you can have a reflective space to grow and learn and share, both whether you're in that boardroom or whether you are aspiring to work at a more senior level. So really, we are about building brave leaders and the boardrooms that reflect them. Leah, shall we click on? So before I move over to introducing the panel, I just wanted to touch on the latest RES data. If you're not familiar with what RES is, it's the Workforce Race Equality Standards that are across the NHS and are now also collected across social care. We have colleagues on the call today who are from outside the NHS, believe it or not, although most of you are NHS. So it's important that we explain what that is. And in the latest round of RES data, we're seeing the same patterns, unfortunately. So what we are seeing, and when I say that, follow what I'm, the top line. So we are seeing year on year that increase in NHS staff from a BME background. And BME is the language that the RES data uses, okay? So I'm using that same language here. But we are seeing that grow year on year. So just under 31% now of staff across the NHS identify as being from a BME background. 17% of board members are from a BME background. Jazz, you should be able to see the slides. So if you want to have a look at your view for me and just check, you should have speaker view and you should be able to see the slides as well. You won't be able to see anybody else in the audience yet, okay? 12% of executive board members, and I think it's important to show the distinction between when we look at board members, not just board members as a whole, because what some of you will be aware of is there was a very big push to have more diversity in non-executive board member roles. And so we have seen that increase more, but I think it's important to keep an eye on this figure here, this third bullet point here. So just under 13% of exec board members are from a BME background. So the disparity there is stark, isn't it? The lack of representation as you go more senior. And we know that that starts to drop off at band 7 and 8 and above. All right. So just calling that out there. This is why we continue to focus on this. And in all regions, all 7 regions of the NHS. So we've got colleagues on the call here from up and down the country. Right. What we are seeing is that there is a lower proportion of BME colleagues on boards compared to the proportion of BME staff. London region continues to show the largest disparity. Over 50% of the NHS workforce in London is from a BME background. Okay, so that disparity is higher when we get to that level. What I also want to mention here as well, before I introduce the panel, is the current NHS restructures that are happening. It was ever more important for me that we had today's session because actually providing access to mentorship conversations, providing inspiration, providing clarity about career progression, it's really important to me that for colleagues who are, affected by the restructures that are happening at quite a pace and scale, that you also still understand and are accessing support for your own personal development. And you feel that within reason, where possible, you can take some ownership of that. So it's really important to me that we provide access to the type of insight that you're going to hear today. And there is always a risk when there are large-scale restructures that colleagues from underrepresented backgrounds are disproportionately affected. Okay, so it's really important that we keep an eye on that. We've got colleagues, chief people officers here on the call as well. We've got colleagues who are leading some of those restructures, and I'm sure they will be very aware the importance of those risk assessments happening so that that disproportionate effect is absolutely minimized. Okay, so I just wanted to set the scene before we got into the panel conversation. I'm going to ask my colleague Leah, who's supporting us in the background, to drop the slides down for me. Now, Leah, please. And I'm going to invite my panelists to put your cameras on. Nearly forgot my words there. Put your cameras on and also come off mute. So Leah, if you could take the slides down for us. I'll give you a moment to do that. Thank you. And if you can then please spotlight our panelists for me, that would be wonderful. And I'll give you a moment to do that. Okay. Okay. And then I will ask my panelists. I will come round to you. And we need Shajeda as well. So I'll just wait for Shajeda to be here. Thank you so much. So I want to say good afternoon and a warm welcome to our panelists this afternoon. I will ask them to introduce themselves as I approach them with their first question, all right? But you would have seen our flyer and you know that we have got a fantastic fantastic group of colleagues here with us today. So without further ado, because I know we don't have a lot of time, I would like to come to Mohit first. Good afternoon, Mohit. Would you like to introduce yourself? And then I'll ask you your question.
Thank you, Monique. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's absolutely lovely to be invited here today. Very grateful. And it's great to be with this amazing panel of people. I'll learn a lot as much as I will be able to share my views. I am Mohit Venkataram, colleagues. I am the Deputy Chief Exec at North East London Foundation Trust, which is a mental health trust and community trust in London on the outskirts. And I have been on boards for the last 20 odd years of my life across a variety of services, from community mental health services, voluntary sector, as well as primary care.
You're most welcome, Mohit. And we've had a conversation separately, isn't it, where I'm so excited for us to be able to hear and from your insights of that very varied but important career. So with what you just said there, can I ask you to unpack it a bit more? So can you briefly summarize your journey into the boardroom, and most importantly, what helped you to get there?
Monique, I think my journey to the boardroom on a health sector wise was pretty standard if one looks at the history of it. I'm a doctor, I've been a doctor for about 35 years, just short of 35 years of my life. I have been leading teams across many, many places. I worked in different countries. I came to the UK in my 30s, and I've had experience of working across primary care, secondary care, tertiary care, local authorities. I have been chief exec of a number of different organizations and boards of others. And I've been on the trust boards in the NHS for about just short of 20 years now. But I think unpacking that journey, not from a transactional perspective, more from the drive, what led me, what were the value sets that created me. There was something around recognizing that being on the board is a lot more around hearing and learning from day-to-day life. I think I've learned enormously from just becoming a dad and taking a step back and recognizing patience is an important factor. I think I've learned a lot from being friends with colleagues, many who I can see today on the webinar, being part of different groups like the APNA, because you learn to hear what others are experiencing and the changes you can actually facilitate that will make a difference to others. But very importantly, it's about what drives you as a person, what are the value sets you believe in. And it's difficult. It's really difficult to be on boards because there is an expectation while being on board that power lies in your hands.
Yes.
But actually, true power lies in everyone who is part of that movement, part of that change journey. So how do you influence that in a way that you create a vision, a picture in which everyone sees themselves as part of that journey? How does it inspire others is what was important to me as an individual. Being kind, being compassionate, having time to listen to people, truly putting aside one's views alone, but thinking wider how you can make a change is really important. Colleagues have often spoken about being on the board being difficult and being isolating, and that's true.
Yeah.
But I think in this journey of coming to the board, it was equally important to have the right mixture of guidance and support along those values, which means creating allies who you could look to when you wanted some advice, when you wanted some support, when there was need to have that one-to-one in a confidential space, because it was difficult going. And many of us have been in those circumstances. I mean, I would hate to say it's just a board discussion. You can be in teams and actually sit back and feel quite distressed about a comment that has been made, whether it's a comment about a color, about a patient, about values, or in today's world about the flags we are living with.
Yes.
So I think being on the board in this journey has taught me as much about the values, what I believe in, what matters to me. And fundamentally, the three things that have stood out to me always has been never forgetting the fact that I came in this to improve care for our residents and our patients. Many of them
Yes.
are like me, people
Yes.
who have come on this journey over to this country in their 30s, in their 40s. It's difficult to adjust.
Yeah.
So, how do you create an environment that's inclusive and
Mm-hmm.
doesn't differentiate between people? The
Mm.
second value set that really matters is the people who are serving, who are with us in making a difference. How do
Yes.
you care for them? How do you make sure you can take away and break barriers that often stop our clinical teams from doing the right thing? It
Yes.
starts from having an understanding of what they are experiencing on a daily basis. So
Mm.
there are many drivers. I mean, there are some fantastic terms used in the NHS, ward to board, walking down. But truly, this is about spending time with teams
Mm-hmm.
and hearing from them the perspectives. But it is about sitting back and recognizing this is not about using your power. This is
Mm-hmm.
about giving power away to those teams to make a difference.
Yes.
Being comfortable in that discomfort because it's your neck that holds the responsibility,
Yeah.
but the delivery only happens from these amazing clinical teams who are in the front line, who on a daily basis make a difference. And of
Yes.
course, we live in a world where resources are constrained, and resources are much wider than just money people talk about. I think how do we use that in the best possible format is
Mm-hmm.
really important. But I'm sure there are many colleagues in this call and many people now on the panel with me who will have some fabulous things to share about their experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking forward to hearing that too, Mohit.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mohit. And I just think that there were some gems in what you really unpacked there. I really heard from you about values, the importance of values, the importance of listening to understand, empowering your teams, understanding that we need to support them. So as a leader, supporting them to provide the best care and not losing that focus on that's what we're here to do, to provide the best care. But really important to me, and I said, I really wanted you to be here because what I heard from you loud and clear also is representation, that lived experience and insight that you have from your own journey, and that really being at the forefront of your mind when you now are leading in the boardroom. Really respect your honesty about, those challenges that we face at boardroom level as well. So thank you so much for unpacking that. Shajeda, I've had the pleasure of speaking to you a number of times, and we've had you as a special guest on the podcast. So you've shared so much with me before, but I'd love for this audience today to hear a bit about your journey to the boardroom, because you've had, a really breadth of experience as a chief people officer.
Okay, do you want me to introduce myself as well, Monique?
Please do. Please do.
So for colleagues who I haven't met, hello, warm welcome, and a special thank you to you, Monique, for inviting me and Bravery in the Boardroom colleagues as well. So I'm Shajeda. I'm the Chief People Officer at Frimley Health NHS Foundation Trust. I think my CEO is on this call as well, so I feel no pressure whatsoever at this point in time. So just a few quick details about Frimley. We're a 14,000 head organisation. We've got over 60 different nationalities, so quite a wide demographics in terms of our workforce population. And quite frankly, we serve a population of over 900,000 people. So one of the largest acute providers in England. So that's where I work. In terms of the question itself, so I'm going to perhaps talk a little bit more about myself in terms of my own journey. People have quite often asked me about, was getting to the boardroom part of my plan? Was that part of a plan? The honest answer is it wasn't. I didn't have a plan. I would actually describe my journey as being a bit of a mishmash, and that was driven mostly by determination and quite a healthy dose of stubbornness on my part rather than a carefully mapped out career plan. I've always worked within HR. That's my profession. That's why I started out earlier. And there was a point in my career in, around 2018, I think, where I generally, and I will say this very openly, I got fed up of being overlooked. I knew I was delivering, I was making an impact, but I didn't feel, no, let me change that. I wasn't seen or heard in the spaces where some of those big decisions were being made. And if I'm honest, that made me angry. Now, people often associate anger as a negative emotion, but that anger actually galvanized me. So rather than let that get the better of me, I used it as fuel in terms of I thought I have to stop and do something about this. I tried to move myself out of that victim mentality, as it were, and move into a space around I need to be more structured in terms of how I really propel my career. And that mindset changed everything for me because I stopped waiting for someone to tell me you're ready. I put myself forward. I took opportunities that stretched me, and things actually made me quite uncomfortable. But I knew that I had to be in that space because I was fighting some of my inner turmoil about how do I get myself noticed? How do I get my voice heard? Now, you often feel quite alone when you're in that space, but you're actually not. You know, I had mentors, some amazing mentors who actually didn't tell me I was great, but who actually challenged me. But equally, in terms of balance, I had colleagues who believed in me. And I also learned something, which is you have to believe in yourself. If you're going to walk through those doors, you know, you've got to be able to do that of your own accord when they're opened. I will always say to people, the boardroom is not about status. It's great to have a title. You've earned it and you should celebrate that. But it's about the influence that you bring. It's about using the opportunity to shape the organisation that you're in. And for me, as a chief people officer, it's to represent the people agenda at the highest level. We've talked about some of the inequalities around workforce demographics. And, you know, I see that as a privilege in terms of, you know, that influence I bring around the board table, which enables, you know, the organisation to make better decisions around different perspectives that we need to be discussing. So the one thing I would say is in all of this is, you know, as someone who it feels like I've had a long, hard career, and it was hard, is do not wait until you feel you're 100% ready, because most of us never are.
Yes.
You know, only you know what you've got to contribute, and only you can put yourself forward. And what I would say is that sometimes the very thing that can frustrate you the most becomes that spark that drives you to achieve more than you ever thought possible. And I'll stop there, Monique, because I always like to keep to time, and I'm hoping that's within 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. And just, you know why I always invite you back, right? Because of the honesty, and you can see the reactions going off there from the audience, okay? That honesty, but that really powerful message you just shared there, like you're never going to be 100% ready. Be as ready as you need to be to go through the door when it's opened, right? And that thing about how do you get your voice heard? You know, really heard your courage there, I think, in your career to pursue what you felt you were ready for, ready enough for, and what you felt your experience deserved. I think that's such a powerful message today. I said it in the introduction about colleagues who are going through, you know, difficult restructures at the moment. That message you've given there about self-belief, really pertinent for today. So thank you so much. Ananta, good afternoon. I'll ask you to introduce yourself and then I'll ask you your question. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, and thank you.
You've just frozen at my end, Ananta. So let's see. Yeah, you're back.
Nick, for inviting earliest. I think one of the... Hello, everyone.
Yes.
All right. Am I back? All right. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ananta Dave, and I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist by background. My current role is that of Regional Medical Director in NHS England Midlands region, in the commissioning team. So I work across mental health, learning disabilities, autism, health and justice, and community services as the medical director for commissioning. And before that, I was a chief medical officer for the Black Country Integrated Care Board till last month. And before that, I was medical director in a trust in Lincolnshire in the East Midlands. So my work in this country, when I came to the country, it was around just over 30 years ago, has always been in the NHS. And I have trained mainly in the Midlands, working in Birmingham and the Black Country, West Midlands mostly, and with a short spell in the East Midlands during those very difficult years of COVID. So I'm delighted to be here today just to be part of the panel and reconnect with colleagues, but also be part of this conversation. Thank you, Monique.
Yes, you're welcome. And two things to say there, Ananta, is, you know, thank you so much, because Ananta was on our panel for our very first Bravery in the Boardroom back in 2022, where we had no blueprint, right? We had no history. And Ananta said yes. And, you know, I really appreciate that. And you shared such gems there. I want to ask you some questions about that. But for those who don't get the kind of great to see colleagues again. Ananta and Shajeda were both on the board at Black Country ICB together, so both held executive roles there. So Ananta, I know you've spoken with me about this before, but I really think it would be great to hear from you how you navigated the intersection of cultural expectations, your own professional ambition, and those systemic challenges that you faced as a board member and senior clinical leader.
Yeah, thanks, Monique. And I think different parts of those questions are all interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
But to pick up a bit about what Shajeda said, my coming to be a board member wasn't part of a plan. It wasn't part of an orchestrated plan. But what I did realize over the years when I continued working as a consultant psychiatrist is that there were things that interested me beyond my immediate clinical environment, beyond the immediate patient sitting in front of me or the patients who were coming to see me in my clinic, or indeed the wider multidisciplinary team. And I kept asking myself questions about the wider community, the wider public, and what did this mean for patients whom we haven't seen or who haven't felt comfortable coming through the door or asking for help. And I realized then that I had to stick my head above the parapet, so to speak, and be in places where we could ask those questions or do something about it. And I remember the earliest things that I had grappled with was around a transition policy in the trust I was working then, a transition for children and young people from children's services to adult services, and how that was very tricky to navigate. And then and the medical director then said, Ananta, if you want to change it, why don't you do the changing? Why don't you be part of it? And so they asked me to lead a project. It was a quality improvement project. So I realized that I was asking questions. I was going on asking questions, for example, about why were we seeing such few children and young people from an ethnic minority background into our CAM services? The proportion of the population where I worked in the Black country, children and young people make up around, I think, 28% of the population. And children from an ethnic minority were around 1 to 2% of our referrals. So there was a huge chunk of people who were missing. They weren't accessing services, but the need was there. So I suppose a series of questions over the years and me getting involved in projects and also I think getting experience in a wide variety of contexts. So because of my interest, I got involved in NICE, the National Institute of Clinical Excellence. I got involved in some parliamentary work at the Royal College of Psychiatrists, in voluntary work through Doctors in Distress. So I think these things sort of set me off in the direction of wanting to see whether I could affect changes at a senior level. And I was encouraged. I was asked to put myself forward for these roles. And I think somewhere along the line, I decided that I was somebody who was happy taking risks. After all, I think the risk of migrating from one country to another, leaving behind everything you know and entering a new country as an adult with no idea of the cultural background, I think is the biggest risk we can take. So at some point, I had to convince myself that I had the adaptability and the capability to deal with tricky situations, to step into the unknown, to think of a wider picture, to imagine something which I hadn't been able to think of before. So that's how I got encouraged to apply for board positions. And I think after having worked in a trust, I thought, why not think in terms of working at an integrated care board level? Because I was really interested in seeing how NHS organizations could impact communities and populations. And that was the raison d'etre where ICBs were set up, to look at population health inequality. So I was interested in that. So I put myself forward for that. And now my role involves being at a regional level. And, how much ever you think you know the NHS, there are always parts of it that you discover and think, wow, this is opening up yet another whole new world of the way things work. And the world of commissioning and specialized commissioning is one such thing. So that's it. That's the thing in terms of my ambition and how I landed up in these positions. I think cultural expectations and systemic challenges go hand in hand. When I first thought of applying for a board level position, and indeed when I first walked into a boardroom, I think and the transition was very difficult for me. I think there were several reasons for that. One is that I had been in the country for around 22 years by then. I think even now when I look at it, I'm one of the older members in boardrooms. And when I started I'd started a bit later than others. But I think so what happened was the experiences I'd had over the years, many positive experiences, but also experiences connected with, I think, xenophobia. You know, as a foreigner, I've been asked enough times when I was first in the country, why don't you go back to where you came from? Or we want to be seen by a real doctor or a real person or whatever it was. So I think a combination of racism, misogyny, xenophobia, all of these things combined, and the intersection of this, the impact of it is greater than the sum of its parts. So I think because they leave a mark on you, although there is some part of you which has powered ahead, you know, overlooking those or overcoming those, another part of you internalizes that discrimination and being seen as less than, being seen as deficient. It took me a long time and coaching and mentoring and being part of a network and having allies to make me realize that I'm different, not deficient. And that takes some unpicking and some time to get over. So I remember, even when I think in terms of how I used to sit in the chair in a boardroom or the kind of dresses I used to wear. I remember when I first walked into the boardroom wearing a traditional dress. And I was, I think, the first person of color in the whole of Lincolnshire to sit in a boardroom, a woman of color rather. And I think walking into that meeting with a traditional dress made me feel so uncomfortable, but I did it. So the initial days were hard. And my very posture, the way I dressed, the way I sat, it was almost as if I had to apologize for who I was. It was almost as if I had to submerge my Indianness to be thought of as more British, and that I belonged and that I was capable. And I had this internal feeling that I needed to prove myself more than others. I had to be better than, more competent, make less mistakes, absorb more work, complain less in order to be taken as an equal. So those were my initial impressions. But you have to reach a stage where you think, this is not something I'm going to passively accept. I have to break this narrative somewhere. I have to change the story somewhere, because my work doesn't end with getting into a boardroom. It begins there. And there are so many people whom I'm representing as a clinician, as people of color, as women, whatever it is, as, you know, as international staff, patients, carers, people in the communities. They are looking to see what difference I will make. What does it mean that Ananta has walked into a boardroom? How is she going to represent us? How is she going to ensure that those voices that are normally not heard are heard loud and clear, not just in a whisper, not just in an apologetic way, but loud and clear? How will she address the inequalities? How will she make sure that out of the 28% children and young people in the Black country, around 34% of whom are from an ethnic minority background, how are they going to access CAMP services? If there is an incident, if there is a complaint, if there is an appointment, an inpatient admission, what does it mean to me as a person of color, and what will Ananta do about it at board? How will she ask the question? But what about them? But what about the children? And so my work had just begun. So I had to look at the bigger picture. And I realized that the part of the cultural expectation is you've also got to learn how to be both. So when I became a board member, my medical colleagues thought that I had gone over to the corporate side, the board side. The board members thought that I was still a clinician at heart. I was still attached to the clinicians. And it's not either or, it's not black and white. And you do not want to perpetuate those reductionist ideas or those myths. You have to be both. As a board member, as a senior leader, you've got to learn how to be both, how to represent the people on the ground who are doing the work and making a difference, how to be a member of a board team, because no one can ever achieve anything by themselves. You've got to learn to be part of a collective. You've got to be the bridge, you've got to be the ladder, you've got to be the glue. So you've got to be different things at different times. So that's something I learned. And then actions speak louder than words. So when you start making a difference, when you pick up things that are glaringly unequal or, you know, not doing well, and when you start addressing them, not as a rescuer. I mean, I think one of the other things I learned is what you are not as a board member. You're not there for token representation. You're not there to tick a box. You're not there as a rescuer. You're not there to sort things out. So you've got to be very clear about what you're not and don't fall into the trap. So you've got to look at what is it that you can do, change things one by one. I think the overall thing that I've learned is inequalities are rife. They are the central point, as Michael Marmot said. They're not some adjuncts.
Let's see if we get you back, Ananta. I'll just give her a
or
moment.
additional points.
There you go.
People who need it, and learn from what you've done and build your tribe of allies and your networks of belonging, which will help you in your role and build on your success, and be proud of your unique identity and the unique strengths you bring.
Ananta, oh my goodness, you unpacked so much in there. And you can see from the comments in the chat as well, that honesty that you shared about the discomfort, but leaning into it. And also, I just loved what you said there. You've got to be the bridge, the ladder, and the glue. But also your honesty about you're not here to sort everything out, but be clear on what you are focusing on. And the understanding. So I think, thank you so much for sharing, unpacking that understanding of, yes, when you are the only one. And as you said, I stepped in, first woman of color in this boardroom. You have to understand what the weight of that is. It doesn't mean that it can crush you, but it's recognizing that there will be expectations on your shoulders from different angles. But also hearing about how you felt that inner chatter, or that imposterism we sometimes call it, isn't it? And how you've addressed that and dealt with it. I did say when we were doing the promos for this session that we're pulling the curtain back, right? And I really appreciate the honesty in these conversations so far, because we really are doing that. So thank you. Beej, very much last but not least, right? Good afternoon. Would you like to introduce yourself, and then I'll ask you some questions?
Sure. Thank you. I definitely feel like the imposter on this screen. I mean, the fellow panelists are so awesome, and some of their experiences and stuff they've talked about is just inspirational. So well done. I'm Beej Palmer. I'm the chair of a mental health and community trust, Herefordshire and Worcestershire Health and Care Trust, which is a large, from a geographical perspective, trust that looks after the mental health care needs and community physical needs of the populations of those two counties. It's really disparate. The edge of Worcestershire on the east is virtually Birmingham, and the edge of Herefordshire on the west is rural Wales. So you can imagine it's a really diverse, for many other reasons as well, but very, very diverse landscape of population and community.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I'm so glad you're with us, because I really like to also have the non-executive view in these conversations from the boardroom as well. But I'd love to hear from you, Beej. What was key for you in stepping into your first non-exec role successfully? And I'd really love for you to also share with us how you got what unlocked the transition to chair as well.
I think a number of people have already touched on, sometimes your career is not as linear as you may think it's going to look like or as planned. Mine was certainly a series of accidents and mistakes all the way through, but you sort of capitalize on them and get on with it. I'd say that it was definitely a conscious decision to move out of a career in banking and finance, which I retired from back in 2019, to do something more purposeful, if you like. And I spent over 25, 30 years in banking and finance, working in various roles, some very senior towards the end of it, and some international. So you have a huge perspective on cultures, on people, on different ways that business is done. And it was a career I thoroughly enjoyed, and one that taught me a huge amount about leadership, about accountability, strategy, and all those sorts of things. But most importantly, making decisions in complex, often fast-moving, changing environments. I started asking myself a different question towards the end of my career in banking, which was, what do I want to do to make a difference personally, but also with a sense of purpose, which I mentioned earlier. And that led me to think about what sort of roles there are in public service. And my whole family are all medics, dentists, pharmacists, and everything else. And I'm the black sheep of the family. So, at the age of 50 something, when I became a non-exec director in an NHS trust, my dad was the happiest man you could ever met. Because finally I'd met his dream of joining the NHS. But looking back, I think the biggest factor in stepping into a non-exec role was to recognize that I didn't want to be an executive anymore, but I did want to use that experience and that skill set. And I wasn't there. I realized I don't want to be there to run the organization. I sort of did that and bore the scars. I definitely wanted to be there to help to shape strategy, help to champion culture, and ultimately the legal and regulatory responsibilities around governing it in a good way. I realized my value wasn't going to come from having all the answers. And if anybody on this screen knows me, you'll know I don't often have all the answers at all. It was going to come from asking questions. Many of the other panelists have already said and mentioned this. It's definitely about listening carefully, bringing an independent perspective to the table, always remembering behind every board paper you read, there's real people, there's real patients, there's families, there's colleagues. You know, I came into the healthcare sector because firstly, there's a family connection to it, always has been, but importantly, I'm at the age of my life where many of my friends and family are patients of our services, and they do an amazing job in the main, do an amazing job of looking after their health and care needs, and I wanted to be a part of that. The biggest adjustment was actually, and again, others have touched on it, it's the influence. Importantly, influence is the most important thing. It's more powerful than authority. It's not about your title. It's not about your position. It's about how you influence. In my previous career, there were many times I was making decisions as part of my role, but as a non-exec, I've learned that it's the quality of the conversation which is as important as the decision itself. And you've got to open up the room and create the environment for those open, often pretty tough conversations. And other board members on the screen will know that often, you know, you're behind a locked room for sometimes a long time discussing some really, really tough decisions.
Yes.
If people feel able to, you know, I believe that if people feel able to challenge, if different perspectives are genuinely heard, if someone could say, I see this differently, without worrying about how that may be received, then I think the board, the committee, the organizations will always make good decisions. And so that's become a real belief of mine as I stepped into this role. And then, so ultimately you asked me how did I transition to becoming a chair?
Yeah.
It was a series of accidents again. And my old chair of the trust I'm with said, how about applying for the Aspiring Chairs program? I couldn't think of something I'd rather be doing other than being a chair of a trust.
Yeah.
But, you know, slowly and steadily you get under the skin of what it involves and you think, actually, I could probably do this and I could be version 1.2 of the previous chair and take it to another place. And importantly, I'm really proud of my heritage. I'm really proud of being Indian. I'm a Gujarati, East African, Indian man, and I bring my whole self to work. So I really wanted to bring that dimension to this role and to my board and to my organization.
Yes.
I don't think it was about being more authoritative. I didn't want that, if anything. It was definitely about being more intentional. I've come to believe that leadership isn't about being the most important voice in the room. I'm often not the one that talks the most. You've got to create the conditions for everybody else's voice, not only to be there, but to be heard, genuinely heard. So what does good chairing look like? And of course, there are moments when you've got to make tough decisions. They're not just the chairs to make. They're for everybody to make together. And you've got to hold people to account. That's the most important thing. But you do that by providing clarity to everyone, including the audience outside of the trust, the patients, the family, the population. You've got to do it without creating fear. So you can do this by being kind. You can always challenge by being kind. It won't always be in everybody's interests, but you can always genuinely show respect and kindness. I have high standards. I hold high standards against everybody, but principally that's around showing humanity to every individual that they touch, colleagues, managers, people below them, doesn't matter who it is. And the biggest lesson is it definitely doesn't come from your title I mentioned earlier. It definitely comes from building trust. You've got to build trust with your colleagues, with your staff, and with the communities that you serve. Finally, I'd say that if colleagues trust that you'll listen to them, and I talk to a lot of colleagues all the time. We've got 60 sites and 110 different services. I'm out and about all of the time. If colleagues trust that you'll genuinely listen and that you'll be fair and that you'll welcome different opinions and you'll always act in their interests as best possible with respect, and I think authority tends to follow naturally and you can get things done. And I guess that's the sort of chair I continue to aspire to be.
Thank you so much. And I just think that, again, hearing that this is who I am and I'm proud of it, you know, I'm proud of who we see from Sabina, fellow Gujarati here, right? But really important for colleagues to hear that, particularly when you are the only one, right? Really important to hear that. Actually, this is who I am and this is how I show up authentically. But having some insight there. So Something I do want to call out in this conversation is we've heard from some of you today about my journey into the boardroom wasn't necessarily by design. But what I do hear is that breadth of experience that you all had in your locker, right? And that's what I hear here. The breadth of experience that you had, Shajeda shared about, actually, I knew what I had in my locker, and it was about working out how to navigate into those senior roles. And Nanta said, I was encouraged to kind of expose myself and go for senior roles. And Beach here, we heard from you, you had a very successful previous career as an executive. And it was like, actually, how do I use that and bring that into a non-executive role? So not by design, but a lot of breadth of experience in the locker that I think absolutely have helped you in terms of how you all lead at boardroom level. Can I ask you a follow-on question before I go back to Mohit? How do you ensure tackling inequalities and discrimination remains as a board priority when everything's a priority, particularly finances at the moment? How do you keep that front and center of your board conversations, Beej?
Gosh, I have to admit, I probably see the question slightly differently in that I don't think tackling inequalities and tackling discrimination is another priority. And it's competing with all the other priorities. In fact, it's probably the lens I tend to look at to look at all the other priorities. We have to be thinking, are we talking about quality of care? Are we talking about patient safety, workforce well-being, financial sustainability, you just mentioned, digital transformation, productivity? There's all these things coming our way. Every decision we make as an organization, as a board, has the potential to either reduce or widen inequalities, or promote or quell discrimination. So for me, it's not a separate agenda. It's not an item that comes up every few months at a board development session. It has to be woven into how we behave, how the board thinks, how we challenge, how we make decisions every day. Now, that isn't, I see it across my board. Everybody doesn't uniformly exhibit those characteristics. So it's up to those that do to make sure we bring everybody with us. I think it's one of the most important responsibilities of being a chair, certainly. It defines the culture of the boardroom, which in turn defines the culture of the organization. The board sets that tone. We don't just oversee strategy, as everybody knows. It's definitely about shaping culture. We have to signal what matters. Every little thing we do or say is a signal of what we believe matters or not, as the case may be. So we influence those conversations throughout the whole organization. If the board treats inclusion and look at the other way, if the board treats inclusion and equality as something peripheral or another priority, the whole organization will look at it that way too. It's just the way it is. So it's absolutely up to us to behave consistently, ask thoughtful questions about equity, about fairness, about lived experience, build those conversations into everything we do. And one of the questions I find myself asking myself time and time again is exactly this, which is who benefits from the decisions we make and who might unintentionally be left behind.
Thank you. And may I just try and weave in, we've had a question from Dina here about, can we have an example of a very challenging decision that needed to be made and maybe how that was influenced? Is there one that comes to mind maybe more recently, Beej, that you feel you could share with us?
Let's face it, in the type of climate we live in right now, sometimes you're looking at services that need to close. And we have had to deal with that recently. And the fallout of that are people and patients sometimes who will have to find other ways of being treated for their health and care needs, who come from in this case, a protected characteristic background. So they are disabled individuals. And the services I'm talking about is respite care for those that care for them. So I'm not talking out of line or talking about anything confidential. This is in our board papers. We've been public about this. But those are the type of tough decisions you're making. In this case, it's about a protected characteristic. It's about a proportion of the organization, the population. And it can't just center around finances. It has to center around how we use resources, of course. But those are the types of tough decisions that we will sweat it out on. And they won't be easy. Quite rightly, they shouldn't be easy. We shouldn't just say the financial envelope doesn't meet this particular opportunity or challenge, and therefore that's what we do. It should be stretched, and every sinew should be tensed to ensure we can keep these services going.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's a really realistic example, isn't it, of some of the decisions that boards are having to make more than ever at the moment. So thank you for that. Mohit, may I come back to you? Because Ananta mentioned about tick box representation, and I know that you've sat on some of the most diverse boards in the country. What advice would you give? And in your view, how do we avoid tick box representation and organizations making performative statements?
Thank you. I think Monique Beach touched on this around tick box representation is not around the monitoring of things that are happening. It's really about developing a culture where people genuinely believe that the difference they are making is impacting the people we're here to serve. And that's where you change the way you're thinking as an organization. Often people look at boards as the place where strategies are developed. Actually, the strategy is nothing more than aspirations of people who are serving them and the communities you're serving too. And that's what is a strategy. It is the stories that affect every life that you're trying to implement and make a difference to, which is actually coming together in a single document that tells you this is how you would want to do this. I think Ananta spoke very eloquently about walking into a boardroom as the only woman of color in a place, which is really powerful. But often there is an expectation in people with color, people with different protected characteristics, in a way that they will make the change. But the reality of this is often the boards, you're not making the change. You're creating the environment where the issue becomes prominent enough for everyone to consider it's important to work through. And I'll probably pick up an example of anti-racism. So over the last few years, there have been so many facets of racism impacting our communities. We serve a population where the global majority is often the majority in the communities we serve. Deprivation is rife. So having a conversation with those communities, we brought together a group of our governors, our local members, our residents, staff, to work together on understanding what anti-racism meant to us as an organization. And it was really interesting. The indicators that mattered to them were different to the indicators had the board decided what we would measure would be. So the indicators that really mattered were, I don't want to be abused when I'm doing my job. I don't want to be called names by patients, relatives, or other staff members. Another indicator, which was picked up by the communities, was how do we increase and widen the representation of people from global majority networks into the services we provide. So there's an opportunity for the communities to turn the tide on what is a deprived community to one of the largest employers in the country to provide opportunities. And that's about future-proofing that change of anti-racism in a way that gives power back to people. So we developed a different dashboard with these particular indicators, setting ourselves a task of how you would support. Now it's interesting. I mean, most boards, Beat spoke about, Ananta spoke about, Shajeda spoke about, often look at dashboards and reports that come in, but actually the stories that are behind these are equally powerful. That's what changes the perspective of what you're trying to focus on. Having come to this country in my 30s, someone who has not done my schooling in UK, not done my professional exams in UK, in fact, not done my first 10, 12 years of career in the UK. It's really fascinating, the kind of things that get influence you. And it helps you think, so what happens to other colleagues like me who come in? What happens to the communities wider who come in? And what are the kind of challenges that impact us? So now we are at a place where we are able to actually distinguish not just the friend and family test and the impact we have, but we can say, what is the differential between an Asian experiencing that versus someone from a Black community or someone who is indigenous and white? That allows us to start targeting the experience of individuals, of communities, of different characteristics in a more meaningful way. Because it's really interesting how quickly we fall into the trap of what is the measures that we are measuring. But actually, the measures have to follow what you want to culturally put in place in such a way that each member, both staff and residents, can see their stories coming out. And they're really powerful. They're really powerful. I think I remember something my mother said ages ago. Things can often look right, but if they don't feel right, if they don't smell right, and if they don't taste right, they're rotten. And I think that's the challenge every board has, that the representation, the formative representation, and is not around what we just read. It's about triangulating that information in a way that's much more powerful from the experience of the people who are experiencing it, from the experience of the people who are serving those communities, and the experience of others. And I think bringing that together is really powerful in making sure we don't fall. I think there's also something around who is responsible for it. And often there is this view that senior managers alone are accountable, or managers are accountable, or boards are accountable. Actually, that falls on every one of us. There is no such thing about no one in an organization having the power to make a change. If you think something is wrong, standing up for it and talking about it is incredibly important. Because the only way the change can be made is that by that. I mean, we've just heard the story of someone like Ananta who said, I walk in and that's what I find and that's the expectation. Or from Shajeda, or from Bij, who spoke about his financial background and the expectations. Actually, what drives us is the passion to make that difference. That's what drives us at the forefront of this. And if you want to make that difference, then you have to believe in it and stand for the values that really matter. And I think it was something Shajeda said which struck a chord so importantly. Making a change is not about one person's job. Making this change is about driving a movement, which means you have to get others on the same platform to recognize why that is important. And that's the importance of making that this non-performative and being a movement and being resilient. Because if I, Bij, Shajeda, Ananta alone had to drive this, when we go, the movement dies.
That's right.
So making this sustainable in the long term is really crucial. That's when the difference comes in.
Yes. Mohit, there's so much I want to, I wish we had another hour, right? Because I want to unpack it, but thank you, because I think thank you to Lee for her question about how do you positively influence when people in the room don't have your lived experience. I think where you started your response helped us to understand how you go about that. And as you just ended there, if we don't positively influence others in the room, when we go, it all falls down. But you also picked up some of what Sasha was asking here in his question about actually how do we ensure boardrooms shield our workforce and what are those steps that they take? And I think what you spoke about there is don't just focus on the data. What are the real measures that are telling you? And how do you start to unpack that, not just for one set of colleagues, but for more? Understand the nuances, understand it for your community and who you're serving, and start to bring some of that information and insight together and go out to them is what I heard there as well. So that you move away from the performative behavior. So really, really helpful. And thank you, because I don't know if you noticed, but you weave the answer to those two questions in there. Shajeda, may I come back to you? I know I'm slightly running out of time, but I really want to hear from you again. I mentioned earlier that many colleagues are impacted by the current restructures and workforce reductions. What would you say to anyone in the audience currently navigating this?
Okay, so this was a really interesting question, Monique, because, I could sit here and talk about, engaging diverse voices, utilizing your equality impact assessments, making sure those processes are in place. But I'm probably going to answer this from an individual perspective because, when you talk about change, change involves everyone. And the first thing I'd probably say is it's a difficult time for many, many colleagues. Restructures and workforce reductions aren't just organisational change by title. They affect us as individuals, they affect the team dynamics, they affect our confidence levels and our family life as well. So it's absolutely completely understandable that many people are feeling uncertain in terms of the current landscape that we're operating in. Now, what I always say to people is that, you can't always control what happens around you. So there has to be a level of accepting the fact that things are changing. We've got a new cabinet in, things are changing in the NHS as a whole. But as people, we can control how we respond to change.
Yes.
And quite often we can go into that apprehensive fear space. And as human beings, that's absolutely natural to do. But at the same time, what I would say to people is you've got to stay open, curious, you've got to keep learning. And if ever there was a time to invest in yourself, it would be throughout change. The NHS itself is changing rapidly, but what that means is so are the skills that we all need. Now, we all know we're seeing a real shift towards AI, digital innovation, left shift transformation, moving more care upstream through prevention, early intervention, and care close to home. But that does not mean people become less important. In fact, it means the absolute opposite. As things like AI take on more routine and administrative tasks, our human skills, those skills around compassion, judgment, collaboration, leadership, kindness, those actually become even more valuable.
Yes.
So I would always say, embrace that change rather than fear it. Ask yourself, what skills do I want to build on? How can I contribute differently? Look at it differently. What we know is people who thrive through change are often those who stay open to new opportunities, even when they don't look exactly like the path they originally planned. We've all talked about how our career map wasn't planned. It's okay, to deviate from a plan. And do not navigate any change alone. Reach out to your colleagues, your mentors, your professional networks, your family members, because the NHS really does well when we all support one another.
Yes.
Now, the reality is the future of the NHS is going to look differently. We can't change that, but our purpose remains the same. We are in the business of improving the lives of our patients and communities. And each of us, it doesn't matter what role you hold, we have a part to play in shaping that future. So yes, it does feel uncertain. But what I would say to colleagues is, don't lose confidence in the value that you bring. It may be that your job title changes. It may be that your team changes. But your experiences, your skills, your ability to make a difference are what is still needed. And always remember that with every change, your best contribution isn't behind you. It's because of that organisational change that what you have to add is still ahead of you. So take the process out of it. We all have our individual power. As a person, own it and go with the flow and the change and shape it in the best way you can. Those would be my thoughts to share around it, Monique.
Thank you. And I think the audience really appreciate you sharing that from an individual perspective and not from a process perspective. Thank you so much. And really, this is the guidance that a lot of colleagues are not able to access from colleagues like yourself, from senior colleagues. Just the space isn't there to hear some of this. So I really appreciate it. And Nanta, I am so sorry. I literally have 1 minute for you, but I would like to give you the last point before I hand over to Tanvir to tell us about APNA, but the connection is there. What role do professional networks like APNA play in shaping safe spaces, confidence, and supporting you with career progression?
Thank you. An important question. And as you said, will resonate with what Tanveer has to say. But it also goes back to the points that Shajeda Bij and Mohit have been making. Firstly, in terms of the professional networks, whether it is a senior leadership position that you're in, or whether you're navigating these kind of very distressing changes that are happening throughout the country in the NHS, it can feel like a very lonely place to be. Your unique circumstances are unique to you. So that can feel as if you're the only one navigating those particular tricky situations. So while everyone's journey is slightly different, being able to come together as a collective, because things can be born better when they are in a collective, and things can be changed better when they are done as a collective. So having that network where you feel that you can be yourself and explain or explore things collectively is very important. And the word apna means belonging. In Hindi, one of the South Asian languages, and Urdu, it means belonging, it means ours. So the whole point is, let's bring people together, find our tribe, find the people whom we connect to, resonate with, who understand us for what we are, who get our history and who get our contributions. So networks like that, whatever they are hugely valuable. And they work not just for colleagues and staff, but they also work for highlighting the inequalities and the problems that patients face, carers face. They help us to connect with our communities, because I think one of the things that I find about senior leadership is, if we are not careful, we can become more and more remote from the communities we serve. We've got to find ways of connecting back to them. So the reason we are all here to humanize healthcare and to build the next generation, those things are served better when you are part of a collective like APNA and professional networks like APNA.
Thank you so much. And that's that point you made there about not forgetting, it also helps us to focus on who we're serving, isn't it? And understanding the needs of our community. Leah, can I first of all ask everyone to show their appreciation for our panel this afternoon? What a conversation. And I can see it in the chat. Such a powerful conversation. Thank you, everyone, for sharing some real insights today. That really hearing that, right? So really important. Just beautiful messages here. Really, really, what an inspiring webinar. Thank you for sharing your incredible stories, journeys, and leadership experiences. There's so many messages here. What I would like to do is, if anyone has any other questions, please do drop them into the chat. I've already prompted the panel that if we have any questions that we didn't have time for, I will ask them if they can answer them offline. I know you don't get access to senior colleagues often, so if you do have any, but what a wonderful way to celebrate South Asian Heritage Month, hearing from you all such rich insight, experience, and honesty. I really appreciate it. Leah, I'm going to put you under some pressure here. I'm going to ask you if you can spotlight Tanveer, and if I could then ask you to pop the slides back up for me. And Tanveer, good afternoon, welcome. Really good to see you here today. I'm just going to let you unmute yourself. I'll let you introduce yourself, and also then it's over to you to tell us a little bit more about APNA.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Monique, and thank you, Alistair, for arranging this. So I have my top brass here from APNA represented extremely well here. So I've got my co-vice chair, Ananta. I've got Sunil Daga, who is the general secretary, Alistair, who is the co-general secretary. So all the big guns are here. So I think I'm already outnumbered by them. So it's a real pleasure to be here, and absolutely insightful words from the fantastic leaders who came here today. I just want to say thank you, a big thank you to all the people who brought the human side of their relationship, with the leadership to the fore today. That was something which resonated with me. As a lifelong person who is suffering with imposter syndrome, and I probably will have that for a long time, I never felt more of an imposter today than being in the company of all these legendary people today. But my MD told me once, he said, your imposter syndrome is your superpower, because it will always keep you grounded. It will make you ensure that you do the right thing. So I view my imposter syndrome as not a weakness, but also a source of continued strength and growth. So coming to APNA, so I'm the chair of the Asian Professional National Alliance, following on from the legendary Professor Jagtar Singh, CBE, and Asma Nafis, who have built a network along with a group of committed people over several years to foster South Asian excellence across all spheres of influence. So we are a staff network, but we are also a network of networks. So we have great collaterals with the NHS Alliance, with the British Association of Physicians Indian Origin, British Islamic Medical Association, and so many other diaspora organizations. So we cover all aspects of healthcare. We are not exclusive to doctors. So doctors, nurses, pharmacists, physiotherapists, HR, legal, admin, community, voluntary sector, everybody has got a place and an importance in the APNA footprint. So that is a little bit about us. We pride ourselves in being a truly inclusive organization, in the sense we are trying to create a foster a sense of belonging, because diversity is a fact. We are all diverse. Inclusion is a choice, but belonging should be the outcome. And that is what we are, keen on continuing. The ethos of APNA is lift as you climb. So as we climb, we also take others along with us, and that ethos is a very prevalent theme of the APNA DNA. So presently, we are working on things like cultural safety, uh, promoting all 9 protected groups of the NHS Race and Equality Act, not just race and religion, which is very limiting in its scope. We are also promoting mentorship for people who are looking for career development, and obviously that's where Bravery in the Boardroom comes, it has a key role to play. And we have now established a separate stream for tackling health inequalities in South Asian communities, and we'll be having a women's forum up and running soon. These were the key priorities for the leadership team for this year, and I am pleased to say that we are on track to delivering them in line with what the board decided as key priorities earlier in the year. So that is a bit about us. We have a very active LinkedIn page, which I am the comms lead and the new membership lead as well. So it's a multitasking chair here. I'm technically not supposed to be able to multitask because I'm not a woman. So I must have tapped into my feminine roots somewhere along the way. A little bit of levity is important in these conversations. Um, so if you see our LinkedIn page, you'll see a great celebration of South Asian excellence. You'll see people promoted from all aspects of senior leadership and right down to the workers, because we believe that you are only as good as the people you lift along with you. So our challenges are, why are band fives of the global majority requiring 17 interviews to get to a band 6 position? That troubles us. We want to change that narrative, and we also want to celebrate the good work that people are doing, because people really want to have a place where they feel like they belong. And I think Apna creates that community. The work that has been done by the previous team has already been legendary, and we are just building on that. So we have a conference coming up, which is in Stevenage, 30th September to 1st October. There will be an outstanding awards night. It is the showstopper of our conference, where all our South Asian heroes are celebrated, and the award, the nominations have all been sent out, so you can follow that us on LinkedIn. We'll have some fantastic workshops, this time focusing on community aspects, NHS 10-year plan, the anti-racism principles which the Race and Health Observatory have put forward. We also have all the regulators in the room. So we have the GMC there, we have the CQC there, and we have Royal College representation in the form of Victoria Brown. Lots of keynote speakers. We hope to have Sir Jim Mackey also come, and Preet Kaur Gill. So we have an eclectic lineup of speakers who have been carefully selected from both the clinical landscape, the leadership landscape, as well as those who bring a community focus and health inequalities. So it's going to be a great conference. My team has worked really hard. Getting a conference up and running is a labor of love. I want to acknowledge my outstanding team, especially Alistair, Professor Jagtar Singh, Panita Chauhan, Kiran Rai, who have done an exceptional job in getting this conference moving forward. I have Sunil Daga here also in this call, who will be leading the research and innovation. Please submit your abstracts. He's a research champion and an icon in that space, being a legendary nephrologist who takes his time to be a champion for health inequalities in South Asian communities. So please do submit your abstracts. Every abstract is an additional 5 points on your CV. And in the era of medical optimization and prioritization, every single bit that you need to optimize your CV is essential. We have subsidized rates for band 5s and belows and medical students to make the conference accessible. As you know, conferences carry a financial footprint, but we have tried our best to make it as accessible far and wide. Um, Being South Asian Heritage Month, I won't take more of your time. One more minute from me. So I'm from Udupi. Udupi is in my name. Udupi is a town in South India, famous for masala dosa. If any of you have had the privilege of having masala dosa, it was invented in Udupi by Krishna Bhatt in 1960, and it's also part of the famous South Indian temple tour. For all Lord Krishna devotees, Udupi happens to be a great center of confluence of religious identity. So that's my pitch for tourism for South India during South Asian Heritage Month. It would be incomplete if I didn't do that. I'm from that place, and I'm a former orthopedic surgeon, A&E consultant, GP, NED in the University Hospitals Group now, and associate chair of QE Kings Lynn, along with being the chair of this fantastic organization and also a national exemplar in differential attainment. I want to bring out one comment which Ananta said earlier. We are different, not deficient. So,
Yeah.
what does diversity mean? Diversity is not about our differences as individuals, but the lack of opportunity to meet as equals. That is
Yes.
what diversity means. And that is why we have these groups to create the sense of belonging. So, once again, a warm congratulations to Bravery in the Boardroom and all the outstanding APNA members who are here today. I'm really blessed to have you as part of my team. Thank you for continuing to make me look good in this suit. And I'll continue to represent your best interests as best as I can. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Tanvir, and I'm really grateful that you took that extra minute to share a little bit about you and where you're from as well. Really appreciate it. We are just a few minutes over, but I will just close off the webinar by reminding you we have a wealth of resources that you can access that are free from Bravery in the Boardroom. We will make sure you get the links to all what's been mentioned. So look out for an email. After the session today, you will get a follow-up email. We will also share the recording as soon as it's ready, and it will have the slides baked into the recording. I really want to make sure I say a very special thank you to Alistair D'Souza. Alistair has been my partner in crime, working on today's webinar. He's worked tirelessly behind the scenes, really brought that APNA collaboration to life. We couldn't have done it without you, Alistair, so thank you so, so much. And as always, do scan the QR code, stay connected with us. Thank you for giving us your lunchtime today. I know colleagues are busy, so I really appreciate it. I say once again, thank you to our brilliant panel. Thank you to Leah, keeping us on track behind the scenes as well. I wish you all a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the rest of South Asian Heritage Month as well. If you are celebrating, recognizing your success as well. And I hope I see you again really soon for our next Bravery in the Boardroom event. Have a great afternoon. See you all later. Goodbye. See you later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Mohit. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
See you later.